last hard for 1 to 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And that can recover in a few days. But that's a totally different phenomenon.
So what do we...
So what we're going to do I think, because I don't think it's worth it to try and accumulate fatigue, because the volume seems to be too high risk, I think, is that we're going to have controlled volume with climbing intensity.
Okay.
So the way we're going to do it is kind of like how I did in the North Americans prep. I can send you the log if you're interested, where it was, at no point was my volume beyond my recovery capabilities, but it was focused on technical load acclimation.
I get what you're saying.
So there's a combination when it comes to powerlifting of recovery from volume, and there's also skill adaptation and acclimation, I think, and then they're kind of separate to loads. So especially with equipped powerlifting, there's some degree of, if you want to call it skill or acclimation or whatever, to just having the heavy loads.
Totally.
And there's a necessity to doing it, but it is relatively durable in that if you have high levels of fatigue, that you can have your highest intensity efforts 4 weeks out, and you will remember how to deal with over 90% work by only training at 70 to 80, 85% over the following 4 weeks.
So,
But
yeah.
if you don't have the ability, and I think that is ideal, because I think that those compensations are the most durable and reliable. So I think that people that go and they work really, really hard and they peak volume, high intensity all the way up till a week out, and then they rest for a week and they go compete, that strategy can work, but it's not reliable, in that you'll often find people that do that either 2 days after they compete or a few days before they compete. They do more than they did on competition day.
Right.
Just because predicting and understanding exactly how you're going to hit your peak, it's such a sharp peak that the likelihood that you hit it on the Saturday you're competing is really low. Whereas when you do a prolonged fatigue, overreaching, whatever you want to call it, when you then super compensate with a slow decrease in volume, climbing decrease in volume, less, that the compensation that happens in that is much more durable, that it doesn't go, it goes up, and it stays up. And I mean, obviously there's some degree, but the peak is much more flat, rather than the peak being...
Is that like the theory of this linear progression?
So the linear progression is the idea of you get used to the heavier loads, and then at the end, you're doing really heavy loads right week out from competition or whatever, so you're fatigued, so then you rest because you beat yourself down, and that absolutely, and in the following 5 to 15 days afterwards, at some point you will totally reach similar levels, maybe even a little higher, but that's going to be for a very short period. So it's, can you find that reliably?
Okay.
Whereas the more Eastern strategy of working hard and then having a prolonged period of reducing volume towards competition relies more so on a more durable compensation. In that, when you continue to train around your, I've heard someone call it, what's his name? The nutritionist guy.
Like Israel?
Israel. I've heard him call it minimal effective volume.
Yeah.
When you train around there, you maintain the high performance quite reliably. And so the idea is that if you push hard and then you train, a little bit above, maybe to a little bit below that minimal effective volume over 4 weeks, 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks, that then you're consistently going to find yourself right around that top. So even if maybe it was more ideal that you trained on the Tuesday before the Saturday competition, but you trained on Wednesday, either way, the amount of detriment down and up you're doing is so little that you're very likely going to be very close to the absolute ideal. Whereas when you're doing like this every week, then when you go to your competition, are you going to be here on the curve, here on the curve, here on the curve, or right at the top, or way down? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Now with equipped powerlifting, because there's an extreme skill component as well, I would argue that in fact the amount of detriment of the recovery is very extreme, but also by virtue of the skill acquisition, you can minimize that in that you can still be very high loads, but at very low RPEs. And that can make it so that the amount of swinging is not as extreme, but it still happens. So that's where when you have a situation where you're 8 weeks out, and you're not really going to be able to accumulate fatigue for at least a couple weeks, and then we don't want to have another injury, so we're not going to try and go crazy as fuck for 3 weeks, then really the only viable option from there is to continue to increase loads. No high RPE work. Only higher RPE work would be at lower weights to accumulate some volume. So maybe, for example, you might be surprised to see that 5 weeks out, we might do, depending on how you...
or something.
Sets of, well, sixes.
On
Like
bench.
5 sets of 6 on high bar squat something, which is kind of odd, but it's so that we can then accumulate some low risk volume, because you still need some volume.
Yeah.
But you're going to see a very linear equipped squatting.
So there's triples going up 5% or something.
Something like that. Maybe not 5%, a little less.
Yeah.
And we're going to probably top out at, you're going to do your heaviest single of something
90.
like 210. Yeah. And we'll probably do that, depending on how things are going, probably about 2 weeks out, and then do one more quick squat 1 week out or 8-9 days out. And then do a belt wrap squat 3 days out, last deadlift 5 days out.
We'll see if I can even hit that at 210.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, the thing is that when I say 210, that's because I'm trying to pick something that's gonna maybe not. And with equip squatting, when we talk RPEs, it's more so how does it look? And could you actually do 4 more reps?
It's not.
But like we're gonna look for something that looks like an RPE like 7.
An opener, like maybe a tab lighter.
Yeah, exactly. So there you go.
I hear ya.
Still warm enough to bench now. And you still have any memory left on your phone?
Oh, tons. I'm gonna upload that to YouTube now.
1, 2, 3. 3, 2, 1, 1, 2. 3, 2, 1, 1, 2. Beauty. 5-second lecture. Give you enough time to recover.